Hello, my name is Drew Willis. Over the past few months, I have been researching the cultural practice of foot binding and will share my findings with you over the next 5 to 7 minutes. Please enjoy. Briefly touching on the history of this cultural practice, the cultural practice of foot binding is not widespread throughout the world, but is instead isolated in the nation of China. The practice originated in eastern China around Nanjing in the middle of the 10th century, more specifically between the years of 937 and 975 AD, during the middle of the Sung dynasty. While isolated practices of foot binding continued to exist, the nation of China formally banned the practice in 1912, and it demised throughout the 20th century. This means that foot binding lasted nearly 1,000 years in China. The demise of the practice was sparked by, but was not limited to, the Christian missionaries who became a prominent influence in China in the late 1800s. These missionaries started the Women's Christian Temperance movement, which fought for the equal rights of Chinese women alike. Discussing the cultural importance. The question of why an individual would desire a foot shaped like this is something that I have consistently pondered throughout the beginning of this research project. At the end of the day, it comes down to the woman having to suffer for beauty. In China, women with small feet were long desired because small feet were considered gentle or sophisticated. Additionally, parents would force their children into the practice for marital purposes. For women without bound feet, it was impossible to find a husband, and it was looked as rude and ridiculing towards the village. There were many incentives to partake in the lavinous practice. While the reason for why foot binding became so popular in China is relatively clear, the true origin of it is not. There are many theories as to why foot binding became so influential in China. One of the major ones is about a dancer named Yao Ming, who allegedly had her feet bound so they looked like new moons. The process of foot binding is a long and dangerous one that can ultimately result in death. The process begins with the breaking of the arch, which allows for the toes to be folded under. Every toe is broken except for the large one. Once this process is completed, the feet are wrapped in white binding cloth that helps shape the feet. The process happened between the ages of 4 and 7 because this is the time in which the bones are most malleable and able to conform. The process takes multiple years and usually starts during the winter, for the cold weather was believed to help numb the initial pain. The ideal length for the foot once complete was roughly 3 inches, or about 10 centimeters. An ideal foot was referred to as a golden lotus. Not all women had bound feet, for during the Manchu reign, many Manchu supporters followed the government's advice and abolished the practice. Oftentimes, removing the binding wraps was more dangerous than actually leaving them on, for abolishing the process, once it had begun, could lead to ultimate disability of the foot. It is also important to note that foot binding has socio and economic ties. In Chinese society, the families with more wealth were able to bind the feet more often, resulting in smaller feet. It became easy to see how much wealth one's family had based on the size of the feet. Besides the practice itself, I researched the consequences of foot binding as well. According to a study conducted by Stephen Cummings, Zhu Ling, and Katie Stone, women aged 80 or older in China had become deformities 38% of the time, while women between the ages of 70 and 79 had the same problems 18% of the time. These numbers come from today. This reveals that the effects of the practice are coming to an end, but the practice itself still remains a part of many lives today. A major consequence of foot binding was not with the bones or the legs, but instead with infection and disease. Oftentimes, the toenails would grow inwards, creating infection that was difficult to prevent. Additionally, during the time frame, Confucian law did not allow much in terms of medication to help prevent infections such as these. To quickly review the practice, foot binding was a Chinese cultural practice that began in the 10th century and lasted nearly 1,000 years. The women did this lavinous practice for beauty and to impress men. Oftentimes it was forced upon them. The true origin of foot binding is unclear, but there are many theories. What is not unclear is that the process was very dangerous and included horrifying acts towards women. Today, the practice is outlawed in China, but is still prominent for many citizens today, and continues to affect Chinese society.